Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. We are going to talk with an author today. I love whenever we have him on, we kind of get inside his head and kind of learn what the writing process is or was when he was working on these books and all the other stuff that he's working on now. Also, the business end, he's shared that as well. And if you're an inspiring author, maybe you're writing a book right now or even thinking about it, some insight for you as well. Chuck Waldron joins us on the program. Hey, Chuck, how you doing?
I'm doing great. This has been a terrific day, and I'm in the writing zone.
Let's start right there. In the writing zone, do you have a certain room that kind of facilitates that for you? You know, for example, where you're sitting right now, is that where the most of your work is done, or you could be anywhere? Take the laptop, throw it on the table, throw it on the deck.
Yeah, that's true. And in fact, even if I can't get to my laptop or I'm not at my computer, I always have a notebook. Always nice to have a visual.
Interesting.
This has been with me for a long time, where it just allows me to write down things that maybe they don't go anywhere. That's okay. They're just ideas that are there that I can go back and refer to. This is my office. I have the sweet spot for me is setting the alarm and getting up about 5 o'clock in the morning. And the reason for that is that I like the dark. I like the quiet, and I can just sit here with my coffee and my thoughts and go through that. And I have all my resources around at my fingertips, my files, etc., like that. So this is a good place. And the zone, two things. The zone refers to, I guess, where I am and doing my work, but also the zone in terms of an idea that I'm working on. And after approaching my 87th birthday, and we talked about that before, I figured it was time to delve into a memoir. So I'm actually started a memoir.
Wow.
I'm about 2 chapters in, and I'm calling it 87 plus years in the rearview mirror.
Nice.
And so that's really, that has my writer's blood boiling now. And it's also a great moment of reflection of things that I hadn't thought about for years.
This may sound kind of silly, but that book, your call it your notebook, your journal, the one that you refer back to.
Right.
Does it sometimes feel that that's a friend, like an old friend that's always there around you, hanging with you?
I think it works. If you just look at all the junk I kind of put on there, these are just kind of silly things in a way, but
sure,
each one of them give me a little bit of a jolt. And then it's an easy book to skim through. That's probably I probably have a drawer full of about 10 notebooks like that.
Wow.
That date back to 1985.
Wow. Let's focus. Now, we've talked about 2 of your books, which are fiction.
Right.
One of them based on a nonfictionist character, Hemingway. Just going to put that out there. But the book is fiction. And this book, it's called The Two Sides, is based on a true story, correct?
It is, unfortunately, based on a true story. And I say unfortunately because I was approached and asked if I would write about the life and death of a young man. Dylan Lyons was worked for a television station in Orlando. He was sent out in the afternoon to cover a murder that had happened in that location earlier in the morning. And as he and his cameraman arrived on the scene, The killer came back, opened fire, seriously injured the cameraman, and with one shot, Dylan was dead. And I think it's important, especially to the journalism community, because it deals with the potential of something going wrong on the job, because journalists are sent into very dangerous places at times. War correspondents go. That's a different category altogether, because that there are going to be risks involved in that. But Dylan was just going out to well, cover a story. I mean, it's something that he did, and as it turns out, this happened on February 22nd of February last year, 1923, or sorry, 2023. And what I wanted to write about was the event itself. And it's sort of like stepping into a minefield, because it deals with such sensitive materials of grief, etc. But I met a wonderful cast of characters along the way. One would be Rick Brunson, who's the professor of journalism at the University of South Florida, who said he recognized Dylan's brilliance on the first day of class. Dylan came into class dressed for work, and he did that every day as a student. And then I talked to the radio or the TV station where he did his internship, and the news director and the person that he mentored with, Eric, said that Dylan was just a real treasure to be around. That he drove himself in a good way, but he also that sparked other people. And Eric, in talking about this, was also mentioning that when he would go out to interview somebody and he would knock on the door, he had his radar. He would stand off to the side and knock the door, so that if the bullets came through, they weren't going to hit him. Journalists are that this sort of thing happening. The safety of journalism now is a hot topic in the journalism community. Schools of journalism are now starting to initiate classes on how to protect, and TV stations and radio stations. They're starting to pick that up and talk to their people about how to be safe. Look over your shoulder and be aware of your surroundings. Yeah.
Well, it's those in the media are somewhat targets. I experienced something journalistically violent in my career. Fortunately, nothing even close to this, but was protected in that a substitute teacher took a high school hostage.
Oh yeah.
And battle fatigues on. I was 3 years into my broadcast career and had just gone full-time as news director literally a month before. I was greener than a tree. And I'm on the air. This guy takes him hostage. The school shot the assistant principal and a teacher. They survived. Now he's got the school. He's got battle fatigues on. He's got grenades, got everything.
Yeah.
And my job was to read his things on the radio. And it started at 1 p.m. and it went all the way until about 8:42 p.m. And I had to sit there, and the police would just walk in and hand me things to read. And I had to make sure I got them right because
I guess so. Yeah.
he would release another student or a faculty member after it was read. One of them was my epistle to the world. I will paint the road carnage with carnage, dog dedications, everything. After about 7+ hours, it ended. He wanted to hear the song Fooling Yourself by Styx, which came out in the 70s, late 70s. And there's a line in there, take your best shot and don't blow it, blow it. And at that point, he took his life, gun to his head. And that's how it ended. Fortunately, uh, just injuries. I don't want to say just injuries, but they weren't super serious, and everybody made their way through. But to the point here is something should be for people like Dylan when you're on the street covering something. Where's the protection? Like, who would have ever thought the killer would come back? Like, mind blowing.
And just the way you talked about it, Steve, it was obvious that those moments that you spent in that scene are drilled into your memory.
Vividly.
It didn't take you it didn't take you long to pull that feeling out, and I think that's what that Dylan had a fiance, uh, and his parents lived in Orlando, very close knit family,
Hmm.
and one of the things that I started to learn, and as I was talking to people that are going through this, is that when he was killed, he was taken to the hospital in Orlando, where um, the 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 bodies from the Pulse nightclub shooting were brought, and so there was this very dramatic where the curtain blanked off the emergency room, and no information was coming out, and of course reporters,
Wow.
all the media descended on the scene, and they got there and they're all feeling, because they were witness to the Pulse shooting aftermath. And it was really interesting that Allison, who the news director on for Channel 5 in Orlando, arrived, and she knew how everybody was just so pumped and uptight and upset, and their support, their news directors and people that would give them support from their stations hadn't arrived yet. She just gathered them together and gave them the not a pep talk would be the right word, but see what I mean? She was helping to keep them um, on task and what they were there for,
Sure.
because they all knew how horrible they all felt.
I'm trying to remember the story, and even just, skimming online as we talk for a moment, the the killer came back essentially to the scene of the crime.
Right.
What was his motivation for firing at the camera person and Dylan? Was he just frustrated, or he's just kind of out of his mind?
This is one of those stories that just it has no answer. He had shot the girlfriend of his cousin. Um, he joined them in the cousin's car earlier in the morning, and just um, without any warning, shot her in the back of the head, got out of the car and started running, and was probably hiding in the neighborhood. And there's some uh, time dispute about the exact time of this, but he also went into a house and shot a mother and her 9-year-old daughter. The mother survived, the daughter didn't. So he's already on the road to having a death sentence for killing the little girl, and
Hmm.
they don't know why, but Dylan and his partner were not driving uh, a
News
any
vehicle?
vehicle that said we're TV or anything like that.
Wow.
So no, but nobody really. There were people around there that saw it happen, and just didn't seem to have any idea why.
Mm.
But what it uh, brings to mind is that how long have we not heard uh, the words our thoughts and prayers. I'm sorry for that. Um, when is that ever enough to just say our thoughts and prayers? I think we need to be talking about the collective elephant in the living room. And I know that there are strong headwinds politically with the NRA and other sides like that. But turning that, our thoughts and prayers, into making a real change if nothing, this book can help remind us that things like this happen. They don't really need to, because the killer was a young man who shouldn't have had a gun. So it calls to question how we address that dialogue about gun violence and the safety of journalists.
What is your approach in this book? Obviously, it is a true story, but you could take different angles in terms of what you focus on when writing it. Was there a certain perspective that you looked at? Yeah, I don't want to give up too much of the book, but
well, it's a book that really doesn't have a plot in the sense that it's going to give away the
we know how it ends. Yeah,
because I start with the first chapter is how it ends. What it's dealing with is how did the characters assemble? Where he met his fiance, how his family moved down to Florida, etc. Dylan's background, how he and his fiance Casey met, and that I could find out by talking to people. Rick Brunson, Eric Sandoval, and Allison were gracious, and other people in spending time on the phone. What I chose to do is try to make it a story, and in the way that in Killer Angel, who wrote the historian that wrote Killer Angel. Anyway, he talked about putting dialogue in the mouth of people like Robert E. Lee and the characters during the Battle of Gettysburg. So I took a look at that and decided that I would approach this as creative nonfiction. So there were parts of this that I could report as fact. But there were also parts where I could put words in the mouth of people. Not entirely, but just to give a hint that this could be also a creative reflection of, this isn't exactly what they said, but this is what they could have said. So creative nonfiction came to mind, and I think that seems to be the case.
It gives us a different view because Dylan and Jesse weren't in a marked news vehicle, that it does appear that the killer was just on a tear because he shot the mom and the daughter after. So and went into a house after he shot Dylan and Jesse. But still, it got the attention of the UN, UNESCO. Had a declaration that it should not and will not be tolerated when it comes to journalists covering stories. But it does bring to light, how many stories that are reported every single day where these journalists are on the front line, essentially, and can be in this situation wasn't a target apparently, but no. Yeah, if I didn't know the full story, I might have assumed that the killer came back and was like, "Oh, you're covering the story, pop." It didn't appear that way. However, it could be very easily in any of these news story situations that are covered around the world every single day.
You see somebody pulling the equipment out of the back of the van and putting the camera on their shoulder and getting ready. Even if the van isn't marked, it's pretty obvious what they're getting ready to do.
Sure.
So that could come into play, and I think that this is a story that was an emotional wallop for me as well as the story itself, because I had to really wade myself through a lot of grief in the interviews, especially with the family. But if this book can do something in promoting a national dialogue around gun violence and journalists, then Dylan's life may not be in vain if our moral compass leads us to change.
Would you have still covered this or focused on this story had it been in another state? You're in Florida, this happened in Florida. Would that have made a difference, or does it literally hit closer to home for you?
Uh, well, there were a couple of things that knowing Orlando. I had a brief stint as an adjunct professor at the University of Central Florida a few years back, so I'm not unfamiliar with the campus, and it's Florida. Um, the other part of it is just the feeling like I may sometimes wonder if I'm the only person in Florida that's not carrying and not packing a gun.
Hmm.
It's just not in my nature, because I was
When
trained
you
in them.
when you first wrote the book, or you
Mhm.
even thought that this is a story that I want to tell,
Yeah.
was was gun violence on your mind from the get-go, or as you continued to drill into the story, see the players and all of that, did that come much stronger to you at that point?
I have to really give this some thought. I think I've always been concerned about gun violence. I've never understood. Uh, I grew up in rural Iowa, farming country, and it was a coming of age for us to get our 20 gauge shotgun, because we were going to go out and hunt, and never thought about that as a weapon to kill people.
Mm.
A 20 gauge shotgun, it can do some damage, but it's not the same as uh, a modern automatic or weapon with butt stocks that can shoot out bullets at an incredible age, and rate rather. Um, so somewhere along the line, this whole worship of having to have a gun to protect ourselves and going back. Um, I lean back on my Canadian side of my citizenship, and in Canada is much more restrictive on the ownership of guns. But a lot of people prior to World War II and Canada going into the war, the men trained at the armory, but they kept their weapons at home. So when the call went out to be marshaled to go get ready to cross over and join the fight, they would literally put their uniform on, get their rifle, and walk out the door.
Mm.
That's always been in the back of my mind, a sense of what that well prepared, well trained militia is all about.
Wow.
It's not just some wild political, one of the political conspiracies that leads us into moral panic about the world.
We're just about out of time.
I know.
It goes so fast. Thank you for sharing this story, and I truly, for whatever reason we derive from it,
Yeah.
I truly believe it is a story that needed to be told, and the way you're
Thank you.
telling it. Just a bright young journalist. We don't see all the other stuff. When you talking to his professor and all of that. And even I read online that his fiance through in vitro wanted to have their child. I don't know if
Yeah.
that happened, but that's which is just tragic. But it does bring attention to what's out there and the potential of what could happen, even just journalists alone. How do we find out more, Chuck, about you, the book? I assume it's all on your website.
Well, it's on my website, and there are also anybody interested, especially in the two sides, uh, Amazon, and I have an Amazon section. But if you put in the two sides and my name, it will easily come up. I like the subtitle. I have to mention that before we wrap it up, and that is the title of the book is The Two Sides, but it's that time between no longer and not yet, because that bullet sliced that moment in time, no longer and not yet. So from his beginning as an aspiring journalist to in vitro fertilization, that was really a key. But ChuckWaldron.com is my website, and got some good stuff on there. In fact, I just recently posted our interviews on there as well.
Wonderful. Yeah, always refreshing talking with you, and just even the subtitle is great. And it's interesting when you think of it. Here's a young man going out there, carving out his career, covering a story, and then becomes the story. And then, fortunately, you keep his memory alive through your book. Thank you so much for being here today, Chuck. I appreciate it, and look forward next time we get together.
Steve, I look forward to next week. Thanks
you.
a lot.
Same here.
All right.
We'll be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.